The Widow's Curse. The year was 1847, and autumn had begun to crawl over the New England countryside. In the village of Greystone Hollow, where fog wrapped itself around the houses like a shroud, there stood a mansion that no villager dared to approach. Its windows were dark, its gates rusted, and its name whispered only in cautionary tales, the Blackthorn Manor. Jonathan Reed, a young historian from Boston, arrived in Greystone Hollow with ink-stained fingers and restless eyes. He had long been fascinated by the grim folklore of New England tales of witches, curses, and restless spirits that refused to sleep. Greystone Hollow was said to be home to one of the darkest tales of them all. The innkeeper, a balding man named Harold, leaned closer to Jonathan on his first night in town. "If you value your soul, sir," Harold warned in a hoarse whisper, "you will stay away from Blackthorn Manor. That place swallows men whole. The widow does not forgive trespassers." Jonathan smiled politely, but inwardly his curiosity burned brighter. The widow was precisely the kind of legend that could make his next book unforgettable. A warning from the church. The following morning, Jonathan attended the village chapel, hoping to learn more. Pastor Samuel, a stern man with white hair and piercing eyes, recognized Jonathan as an outsider immediately. "You are the historian, are you not?" the pastor said after the service. "I know why you are here. Many before you have sought to uncover the secrets of Blackthorn Manor. None returned unchanged." Jonathan adjusted his spectacles. But the story deserves to be told. Who was the widow? Pastor Samuel hesitated, his fingers tightening around the crucifix at his chest. Her name was Margaret Blackthorn, wife of a wealthy merchant. 50 years ago, her husband and children perished in that house, every one of them. Some say it was sickness. Others that she called upon the devil himself to preserve her youth. What remains certain is this. Margaret's body was found at the dining table, her eyes burned to ash, and yet her lips smiled. Since that day, her spirit has lingered. Her veil still moves in the windows. Jonathan felt a shiver, but he scribbled furiously in his notebook. Eleanor. It was Eleanor Ellie to the townsfolk who finally agreed to guide him. She was a farm girl with sharp features and fearless eyes, unusual among villagers who trembled at the very mention of the widow. "You really want to go up there?" she asked Jonathan one afternoon as they walked through fields already browning with the season's chill. "I need to see it with my own eyes," he replied. Ellie's lips tightened. "My grandmother told me stories. She swore that on stormy nights, she heard wailing from the manor. And once, she saw a woman in black at her door asking to be let inside." "Do you believe it?" Jonathan asked. Ellie's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "I believe enough to know it isn't safe. But if you're going, you'll need someone who knows the way." The mansion. They went at dusk, when the sun sank blood-red behind the trees. The gates of Blackthorn Manor groaned as Jonathan pushed them open. Vines clung to the iron like skeletal hands. The air grew colder as they crossed the courtyard, the crunch of dead leaves beneath their boots sounding unnaturally loud. The mansion rose before them, its shutters broken, its once grand pillars cracked. Inside, dust coated the furniture like a second skin. Cobwebs hung thick from the chandeliers. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the drip of water somewhere deep within the walls. Jonathan lit his lantern, its glow trembling across portraits that stared down from the walls. The faces of the Blackthorn family, pale, stern, and unsmiling, watched him. One portrait in particular made him pause. Margaret Blackthorn, the widow herself. She was painted in a flowing black gown, a veil covering her face, though her mouth curved in a faint, unsettling smile. "Eyes?" Ellie whispered. "They look alive." Jonathan leaned closer. Indeed, in the dim light, the painted eyes glimmered as if wet, as though they were truly watching him. The diary. They found the diary in the library, hidden beneath loose floorboards. Its leather cover was cracked, but the ink within remained sharp, as though written yesterday. Jonathan read aloud, his voice trembling despite himself. October 12th, 1797. My husband grows weaker each day. The children cough blood. I have prayed to God, but he does not answer. If heaven will not listen, then I must seek another power. October 18th. I have seen him, the one who walks between the trees at night. He offers me a bargain. Life for death, youth for souls. I will do anything to keep my beauty. Anything. Ellie's hand clutched Jonathan's arm. We should stop. But Jonathan could not stop. His eyes devoured each line, his scholar's hunger overwhelming the dread that coiled in his stomach. October 23rd. They are gone. My beloved family sleeps forever in the earth. Yet I am radiant. My skin glows as in youth. My hair is untouched by gray. But the shadows whisper, the price was not enough. He will come again. The last entry was stained with something dark, almost rust-colored. Jonathan realized with a chill that it was dried blood. The first encounter, that night as they prepared to leave, the storm broke. Rain battered the shutters. The wind howled like a chorus of the damned. Jonathan and Ellie tried to retrace their way through the dark corridors, but the mansion had changed. The halls stretched longer. Doors appeared where none had been. The very house seemed alive. Then came the sound, a slow dragging across the floorboards above them. The scrape of something heavy being pulled. Ellie froze. We're not alone. Jonathan lifted his lantern. The flame flickered wildly. Shadows lengthened, twisting into shapes that writhed across the walls. And then they saw her. At the far end of the hallway, half shrouded in darkness, stood a woman in a flowing black gown. Her veil trailed to the floor. Her head tilted unnaturally to one side, and though her face was hidden, Jonathan felt her eyes burning through him. The widow. The lantern sputtered and nearly died. Ellie whispered a prayer. Jonathan could only stare, rooted to the spot, as the figure began to glide toward them. Silent. The apparition at the end of the hallway drifted forward, her gown whispering against the floorboards though her feet did not touch them. Jonathan's lantern flickered violently, the flame bending as though straining away from her presence. Ellie clutched his sleeve. Jonathan, we have to leave. Now. But the widow raised her hand, gloved in black lace, and the air itself thickened. The doors behind them slammed shut with a thunderous crack. Jonathan's scholar's mind screamed for reason, for explanation, but terror froze his body. Only when Ellie yanked him down a side passage did he stumble into motion. They fled through corridors that twisted like the coils of a serpent, the house itself reshaping around them. The dining room. They burst into the grand dining hall. The long table was still set, plates tarnished, goblets crusted with black residue. At the head of the table sat a chair, tall-backed and carved with roses. And in that chair, she waited. The widow. Her veil concealed her face, but beneath it came the faint glow of embers, smoldering where eyes should be. Her voice was soft, yet it filled the hall. You read my words, Jonathan, read. Jonathan's throat went dry. Your diary. Her veil tilted. Ink becomes flesh. Thought becomes life. By reading, you have given me breath again. He realized then the awful truth. Every word he had spoken aloud from the diary had fueled her return, had strengthened her shadow. Ellie whispered, She's binding herself to you. The widow's laughter rippled like silk tearing. So eager with your pen, little historian, you will write the rest for me. You will finish what I began. The writing. Jonathan stumbled back as the widow extended a pale hand. His notebook, heavy with scribbles, tore from his satchel and flew into her grasp. She laid it upon the table, and a quill, black as crow feathers, appeared beside it. Write, she commanded. Jonathan's hand moved against his will, seizing the quill. Ink oozed from its tip, though no inkwell fed it. His fingers scrawled across the page, not his words but hers. He shall remain. He shall join the feast of silence. His blood shall stain the stones, and his soul shall wander with mine. Stop! Ellie cried, rushing forward. She seized Jonathan's arm, trying to pull the quill away, but the ink bled across the paper of its own accord, spreading like veins. The widow rose from her chair, towering, veil lifting slightly to reveal the hollow sockets. Within them burned red fire. The storm. Outside, the storm howled louder, rattling shutters until they splintered. Wind rushed into the hall, extinguishing Jonathan's lantern. Lightning seared the sky, illuminating the widow's skeletal face for a heartbeat, cheeks sunken, lips stretched in a perpetual grin. Jonathan felt his body weaken, as though the ink he had spilled was draining his very lifeblood. His vision swam. He clutched Ellie's hand, desperate. "Run," he whispered. But Ellie shook her head, tears cutting down her cheeks. "Not without you." The widow advanced. Shadows clung to her gown, writhing like living things. Her voice was silk over steel. "One remains, the other may go. Choose, girl. His soul or yours." Ellie screamed, "Take me instead!" But Jonathan, summoning the last shred of his will, shoved her toward the door. "Go, Ellie. Tell them what happened here." The shadows surged. Ellie was hurled out into the corridor, the door slamming shut behind her. Her fists pounded uselessly against the wood. The tragic end. Jonathan staggered backward as the widow loomed. The diary still lay open on the table, its pages fluttering in the storm's breath. His name was already etched in crimson script. He gasped, fighting the invisible grip around his throat. "Why me?" The widow lowered her face close to his. Her breath was ash. "Because you gave me voice. Because you believed." The last thing Jonathan felt was the quill piercing his chest like a blade, though it left no wound upon his flesh. His cry was swallowed by the storm. When Ellie finally broke down the door, the dining hall was empty. The table gleamed as though newly polished. The diary lay shut, its cover unstained. But upon the wall hung a new portrait. Jonathan Reed, painted with uncanny detail, seated beside Margaret Blackthorne, the widow herself. His eyes were wide, pleading, yet his lips curved in that same faint, unsettling smile. Ellie fled screaming into the night, the storm raging behind her. And in Greystone Hollow, the legend of Blackthorne Manor gained a new chapter of the historian who came seeking truth, and instead became part of the tale. Like and subscribe, please.